All right, welcome back to another episode of Into the Valley. So, this week, international break. So we're going to be doing something slightly different. So we're going to be kind of go more down our kind of just general championship route this week. And we thought it would be quite an interesting one to look over what from our side are the three biggest kind of overachievers this season in comparison to what we thought, and then three teams also that have kind of underachieved this season in comparison. So I think before we get too far into it, 9 games into the season, 8 for some, but 9 for most. Yeah, what's your general thoughts on the table so
Well,
far?
I think the championship is always a crazy league to sort of predict, and I think even just going off of our sort of early predictions, there's definitely some sort of interesting ups and downs in the division. Obviously, we are still quite early in the season, so it's one of those where stuff is definitely going to move about. I don't see, for example, Sheffield United finishing bottom of the league, but to the same degree, the more
Stranger things have happened.
that, yeah, no, 100%, and also the longer things go on in terms of a team not getting wins and sort of really getting buried in that sort of dogfight at the bottom, it can get really hairy. And I think like momentum is huge in football, and on both ways. If you're winning, you go, you're in a real sort of role. When you're losing, it's very hard to get out of that rut. So it will be really interesting to see how some of these teams that have started off struggling start to sort of whether they can turn things around or if it really does become a problem.
And also the other side, which is the teams who have really kind of flown out the traps,
Yeah.
whether they
Can keep it up.
can keep it up. I think it's an interesting one because I think it is early in the season, but a lot of teams kind of talk about getting to those first 10 games and then we'll take a view on where we're at.
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting one because it is early in the season, but we are further than those first few games where you can just kind of bat it off. And I think there are some, give it a few more games, and if certain teams are where they are, they'll either be very excited about what the season has to hold, or potentially, like we'll discuss with some of the ones today, a little bit concerned of the direction it's going.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting start, and like we said, you're like coming up to 10 games in, which is almost a quarter of the season. So it is starting to take shape. There'll be movement still, but yeah, it'll be interesting to go through these sides.
Have you been surprised yourself, kind of looking at the table as to where some teams are? I mean, just some honourable mentions that I'm sure some of the fans would be nice to know that they're not in the video today, but I mean, Wrexham 18th, Southampton 17th, Birmingham 16th, and Ipswich 9th. I mean,
Yeah.
not where we'd maybe expect teams like that to.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely been some that have sort of been slower to start. I think teams like Ipswich, Southampton, I know are quite low down at the moment. I do see them sort of picking up. It's got to be a matter of time, surely, that the sort of quality of the squad's going to actually sort of kick in. The teams like Wrexham, I think 18th, probably around where I expect them to be fair. And then your Birmingham's, that was a bit of a one that no one really quite knew what was going to happen in terms of have they got enough to really then push on. In my prediction, I had them finishing 6th, so I did have them pushing into that playoff spot. There's still a long way to go and it could still happen, but obviously they'll need to start getting some results again. And I think that's the thing with the championship. You lose a couple of games, all of a sudden you start dropping down the table.
Well, and the mad thing when you look at Birmingham, they're 3 points off 6th place.
Yeah, the league's still very tight.
Yeah.
I think another sort of 4 or 5 games, we're really actually going to start seeing a bit of a divide between sort of that bottom half and the top. You'll start to see a point differential between the clubs, and that's when you'll start seeing a bit more of a gap opening up, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, no, some interesting ones in there. Some teams you'd expect where they'd be, but it is. I think the main thing is, I'd say probably down to probably about 16th, 17th. All of those teams week on week will kind of rotate round, and that kind of goes up to probably 3rd, 4th place. It's quite a mad one so far. So, well, let's get into the kind of main crux of the video then. So, let's start off with the teams and I think we're kind of looking at this. It's not necessarily completely overachieving, but I think it's more teams we're surprised to see them in the position they are. Albeit some of these teams maybe did have potential, and that's the same as it goes down the table. But we'll start off with Middlesbrough.
Yeah, so they're sitting second after 9 games. I I did think this season would be an interesting one for them because you've got Rob Edwards coming in, who I really rate. I think he's a class manager. I think he did a great job at Luton. I think they played good football when they were in the Premier League. He was there for a few years. And I thought the whole time he was there at Luton, he played a really nice style of football. And I think he was a sort of manager that if he, under the right sort of board with a good squad, and I think ultimately Middlesbrough are a bigger financial threat than Luton. And it's starting to show because I think he's working with a sort of higher caliber player, you'd argue. And with his management style and stuff's clicked pretty quickly for them. If you look through the results they've beaten some really tough sides in that first opening run of fixtures. They've got good quality players in that squad, and they've got good high value players as well. So, yeah, they've started better than I thought. Second, I didn't expect them to be second after 9 games.
And I think it's a tough job because there is a lot of expectation from the fan base that hasn't really been kind of there over.
They've had quite a lot of disappointment, haven't they?
Yeah.
Like they obviously end up finishing 10th last season, and I think they're a club that expect more than that for the size of the club, sort of the fan base, like you said, the pressure they're under. He's come in and he's obviously going to be aware of that, and I think they've started very, very well. So it's just whether they can keep that up as well. That's the
And I think that's probably the big thing with them. I think it's whether they can keep it up. If you look over their last 5 results, a 1-0 loss to Portsmouth, 0-0 draw with Stoke, 1-1 draw with Southampton, 2-1 win against West Brom, and a 2-2 draw against Preston. So it definitely has that initial start to the season, which was kind of win, has definitely tailed off. And it will be very interesting now. I think you start to hit that point where, especially when you've got that incredible form drops off, okay, do you start to not necessarily go back into that incredible form, but can you litter the wins, draws, or will that start to... Because I think a lot of their games have been relatively fine margin.
Yeah, and I also think as well, like the nature of the Championship, you've got clubs in and around you. There are going to be teams that go on a little win streak. All of a sudden, they start bumping themselves up. So naturally, in that division, you start seeing teams flip and flop sort of between 4 or 5 league positions because of the way that the table sits. But I would say Middlesbrough definitely have been a bit of a surprise package in terms of how quickly they started. Like you said, I think they had a run of 3 or 4 wins at the start of the season, which really like kept them up at that top of it. And so now if they get a couple of draws, they're still up in that top part of the table. It's just how they push on now from the position they're in, whether they can start to handle that pressure of being one of the sort of top teams at the moment.
Yeah, and it seems like, I think as a team, their central midfield partnership they have, I think, is probably one of the strongest in the league.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that kind of brings them a good way, because I think it is, we talk about with Charlton a lot of the time, that a lot of it's about that spine of the team, and having that there, I think is a really, really important kind of quite vital part of actually getting a good team together.
I think as well they've got some quite good experience in that side now. So they've got Ayling, who obviously was a really good solid player for Leeds when they were sort of up at the top of the table. Obviously played in the Premier League and played in the Championship as well. They brought in Matt Targett from Newcastle on loan, who's a really solid player. They're bringing sort of players in with a real quality.
I think he's been pretty good for them.
Yeah, so I think those sort of players are going to be really important for them if they can keep them fit throughout the season. They sold Finn Azaz to Southampton, so that was actually a bit of a loss for them because he was a quality player. And obviously going to Southampton, essentially, that's a promotion rival. But saying that, they brought other quality players in, and then they've got, I think it's Conway, they've got a few others that are really good sort of goal-scoring players as well.
Do you think, though, on that same vein, though, with them, one of their maybe, if you were to take one of the negatives of this season, I think they've been very good defensively and in the midfield, but maybe in the attacking areas, they're not quite getting the goals. So at the moment, I mean, top scorers is Calais Sene on 2 and Tommy Conway on 2. Next one down 1. So it reminds me similar to some of the conversations we've had around Charlton, for example. But I think there's other teams who are maybe seeing that, where their strike forces aren't really quite clicking at the moment.
I think sometimes that early part of the season, some players take a little bit of time to get off the mark. And I think you start to see players get into a flow. They start getting 2s and 3s in one game. All of a sudden, they're starting to push up in the goal scoring tally. But you're right. You do, when you look at teams that have got promoted from the Championship, they tend to have at least one striker who's hitting a significant amount of goals. So if they're going to stay up that end of the table, then they're going to need a few of their attacking players to get a good glut of goals during the season to keep them up there. Whether the likes of Conway and Sen and players like that can do that, we'll find out. Yeah.
So I think the final one before we go on to kind of our next team. So I think we'll do this with every team that we come across. But so currently sitting in second place.
Yeah.
Do you see that being where they'll finish at the end of the season?
No, I personally don't have them in the top two. I did have them in my prediction at the start of the season. I had them in the playoffs. So, and I will stick with that. I think with Rob Edwards managing that side, I do think they've got enough, both managerially and the quality of the squad, to finish in that top 6 position. I don't think they've got enough to finish in the top 2.
No.
Saying that, like you said, weirder things have happened, and in the Championship, I think this is one of those seasons that's probably one of the most open.
Yeah, I was going. I like it is.
We've already seen the players. Some of those teams, Southampton's, Ipswich's, the teams that have come down, haven't started as well as we thought they would.
No,
but that's because it's so competitive as a division,
and it seems like such a fine margin league this year, where you are seeing quite a lot of 1-0s, 2-0s, 2-1s, and I think the flip side of that as well is you're seeing teams that when they lose one week are winning the next and beating someone who you thought was red hot on form and someone was out of form. It's just there's only a few that have really faltered.
Yeah, and
there's no one who's really. I think Coventry are probably the standout at the moment of looking like maybe the more runaway.
Well, I think Coventry, in terms of those, we haven't put them into our, because we knew that they would probably be up in that higher end of the table this season, especially after last year. But saying that, they've scored a lot of goals. They're one of the only teams that have been sort of battering teams.
They're ruthless.
Yeah, they're scoring a lot of goals.
I think they've probably outscored the next team, the team next to them, by quite.
Yeah. And that is a sign, actually, that they are a team, if they can continue with that sort of form, they will be right up there, because naturally, if you can score, it doesn't even matter if you concede, if you're scoring 3s, 4s a game.
They're also not bad defensively.
They're pretty solid.
Yeah, they've got some really good players there as well. So
yeah, but in terms of Borough, I mean, time will tell whether they've got enough to stay up in those top 2 positions. My only fear with them is, like you said, actually, I probably think maybe they might struggle with those sort of amount of goals they can get in a game, whether they can spread that across the whole team.
And that sometimes isn't a bad thing, because when you have a runaway player, like, for example, you had G. Wrights and people like that, or Josh Sargent, realistic side is they get an injury, it's pretty catastrophic for the team. And I think actually when you have it spread out a lot across more of the team, it can work quite well. The only thing I'd say to that is I think when you're sometimes out of form, those individual players can be what drag you through games. And I worry sometimes looking at Borough, and I suppose my view would be I don't see them finishing where they are now. And I strangely just have a feeling they will drop. I think they'll be
tail off a little bit.
I still think I think I probably had them a little bit too harsh in my prediction. I think I had them mid-table. I think I'd maybe see them more around probably the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere around.
I think they'll be flirting with the edge of the playoffs. But we were going back to like the goal scoring element of the team. Some of that does come down to playing style as well, because you get some managers that aren't necessarily looking for a spearhead striker. They're more looking for the whole team to chip in and get goals from the midfield and stuff like that. So, I'm really interested to see how they sort of continue their form. I know we've got them coming up in December, I think. So, see whether they're still up there.
It'll be an interesting one. Hopefully they've tailed off in form by then. So let's move on to our second spot. So second team that we feel has probably overachieved this season, Stoke City.
Yeah, Stoke are always notoriously like a tough side to sort of predict. I think in the years gone by, they've sort of always been one of those sides that sort of either been in the middle of the park or down the lower part of the league.
But always with the expectation behind them that this is their year.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're the team that I don't think I've heard it any more of any other team than Stoke, where it's just every season it's they've got their stuff together, it seems like this is going to be the year, and they're always just teetering around almost like flirting relegation or just above.
But it's funny because we're going to probably say this about pretty much every club we talk about today. The fans have an expectation, and I think every club has that, where the fans believe the club's big enough and sort of successful enough to actually push on and go for a promotion sort of season. With Stoke, I think they've always struggled a little bit with getting a few players in that haven't quite hit the ground. They've either spent a bit of money and it's not quite worked out. Obviously, they've been down from the Prem for a little while now too, so it's not like they've got massive amounts of money in terms of parachutes and stuff like that. Um, in terms of management, Mark Robbins, I think we spoke about it in our prediction beginning of the year. He is a class manager, and I think he's got pedigree as well.
I think he has, and I think he was. My biggest worry was him going to Stoke, being Stoke. That so many managers have gone there and tried who have very good pedigrees behind them.
Yeah.
But it seems like whatever he's maybe doing there is clicking more than what others have in the past. And yeah, I think it's a massive tool to the kind of arsenal. And I think there's actually quite a few teams in the Championship this year where I'd probably stand behind the fact they've got the manager rather than maybe their out and out outlining squad or starting 11. I think there's some really class managers in the league this year who I think will take some teams further than what they should. Although there are some who maybe have started a little bit more disappointingly than I thought. One of those would be Derby, John Eustace. I had Derby as one of the maybe slightly stronger teams in the league. I thought they were going to have a really good season with the signings they've made, and I think they haven't maybe had quite the start they wanted to have.
No, and I think a team like Stoke as well, I think they've always got that. They're very tough to beat at home. There's that whole cliche of can you do it on a rainy night, Tuesday night in Stoke. That helps because I think it creates, and I think there's a few clubs like that where their home form is massive. And I think Stoke as a club, they've got a fairly strong fan base, like I say, an expectant fan base. They've added some quality to the squad as well. I like the signing of Sorba Thomas. I think he started really well for them.
He's been very good, yeah.
And I think a few key players like that in their squad, all of a sudden they go from being that sort of middle of the road sort of club to actually being able to have a bit more quality to push the team on. And ultimately, whenever you see Stoke on a fixture list, if you're the club coming up against them, you know it's going to be a tough day. Like I say, actually, under Robbins, manager who's really well seasoned, you know he's going to have them set up well. And obviously they've started really well. I mean, you can run through like their sort of form.
Yeah, and I think as well, before we go into that, I think one of the other things as well with them is maybe slightly different to what I think the Middlesbrough conversation we're having. I think they're a little bit more free-flowing on the goals. I think the creativity, maybe that will also come to a detriment of, like most things, there's very few teams who have the perfect setup. And that might come to a detriment of other areas, but I think that's something that they have got clicking this year. And as I say, Sorba Thomas is kind of one of them, but I think there's a few players in there that are just gelling together well on that. So looking over their last 5 games, so we've got a 1-1 draw with Blackburn, 0-0 with Borough, 1-1 with Norwich, a 1-0 loss to QPR, and a 1-0 win against Birmingham. So
it's kind of an interesting one. Again, it's similar a story to Middlesbrough, actually.
I think both of them were the runaway in the league, and I think they've both tailed off a little bit. And I suppose you look at it and say, similar to what we said on the last one, is where they are currently where you'd expect them to finish.
And I would say, again, Stoke are a side that I didn't have in the top 6. So whereas Borough, I thought they could do it under Edwards, I wasn't sure, and I think because they finished 18th in the league last year, we've seen them finishing in that lower part of the league. Nothing really sort of stuck out to me to think, okay, this season they're going to really push on. And they've started really well, but whether they can keep that up is another matter. And I think time again will tell, obviously. But have they got enough in that squad? When you look at the other squads that are around in the league, albeit your Southamptons, Ipswich's have started slow, and can they pick up in form? We'll find out.
As we said, the league's so tight; it doesn't take long to get dragged down.
Doesn't
through the table.
It doesn't. And like if Stokes all of a sudden lost 3 or 4 games in a row, they'd be pushed down.
Well, they'd be down right towards the bottom.
Yeah, and that's the same for all clubs really in that league. If you lose 3 in a row or you win 3 in a row, you see a big shift in the.
Well, I think the dangerous thing in the league is you see the quality of squads that are down at that lower point of the table. You do feel
there's going to be movement.
There's going to be some movement from there, and teams who are going to start chasing up the league. So, I have to admit with Stoke, I think it is more of a very good run of form and a very good start to the season. I hold by similar to what I had in my prediction in regards to, I think they'll be maybe a little bit higher, maybe going into mid-table. I still wouldn't be shocked if I see them down more towards the troubling end of the table, albeit I don't think they're a team who will get relegated. But I just, with them, as much as I look at it and I think, wow, what a start, and it is a really overperforming start, I think I see it as that overperforming. Whereas I think with someone like Borough, it's a very good position, but I'm not sure I see it as much in that vein as I do Stoke.
I'd be quite interested to know what Stoke fans thought, actually, because for us, it would be a start that we weren't necessarily seeing coming, whether they were expecting it. Because they're a club, like I say, they're quite expectant as a fan base. And I think maybe they were thinking, actually, this year everything could start clicking and we could start pushing up. So maybe we're seeing it as a bit of a shock, but to them, they're actually thinking, yeah, well, this is where we should be. I don't know.
Maybe.
It could be.
It's interesting one. If there is any Stoke fans watching, then leave it in the comments. Let us know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that probably sums over Stoke quite well. So we'll hit our final one then of the Overachievers, and one that I have to admit has taken me by surprise to a ridiculous level. Preston North End.
Yeah, I think Preston, they finished 20th last season, so they literally just scraped in above the sort of relegation zone. Again, it's one of those where when you see a team finish in that sort of vein last season, you do not expect them to be where they are now, which they're sitting 4th in the division after 9 games. Charlton, obviously, we played them last time out, lost. They were a really well set up side, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that I came away from that game was very well drilled, very solid across the board. We spoke about it in our podcast last week.
No real superstar, but a very good squad.
They have, and I think they've added quite well in terms of the players they brought in, and that on top of having Heckingbottom as manager, he's not going to be the most glamorous, is he? Like, do you know what I mean? He's pretty gritty.
Yeah.
But he will grind results out, which is what he's been doing. They've got a little bit some quality in that squad. Obviously, they brought Small in from us, who is a really good player. Actually, we know that from seeing him week in, week out. And they've got other players in that team that are exciting. They've got elements of that exciting sort of type of player.
And they've got quite a few players in the squad who seem like they definitely have the little moments of being good players. Whether that consistent over a 46-game season, that'd probably be my biggest concern to raise to them, because they don't have what I would describe as any standout players. It's whether that does, once again, similar to the conversation before, whether it's a form side or whether it is genuinely they are looking like a more quality outfit. And I think the one thing I will say is, of all the teams we've played, and we've had some pretty tough games this year, they're probably one of the teams I was more impressed with. So
100%, and I think
we've had, Leicester. There's some.
Oh, we played some tough
Leicester, Bristol City away. Like, there's good teams in there that.
Yeah.
Sheffield United.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Preston definitely as a club, they're again another good side. They've got a lot of good history behind them. I'm not sure their fans would be expecting them to be sitting in 4th after 9 games, personally, but they are a club that if they can continue to hit that run of form they're on currently, who knows? They could finish in that top 6. You don't know.
I think the interesting one with Preston is when I look across and our own predictions, but many other people online as well, so many fans had them down right towards the bottom end.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing probably from Preston fans, and once again, if there's any in the chat, let us kind of know and leave some comments, because the question I would kind of have towards it is, I think there was such a negative outset from everyone external from the club, but the fans themselves and the club, what was the expectation to come into this season and be a mid-table, a playoff pushing side? Because I just, as I say, it's really taken me by surprise, and I think that's the kind of game I would have looked at the beginning of the season and thought, licking my lips, yeah, and I have to admit, I went into the game and even beforehand and thought, this is going to be a really, really tough game, and it was, and I was really impressed with them, and say one of the more impressive teams we played.
And I think, again, it's like every supporter of every club is going to have a higher expectation than the people around them generally. That mainly comes from optimism of just having a good year. But I'm intrigued to know what Preston fans would make of their start, and also whether they feel they can sort of keep it up. Because they're probably, of those 3 sides that we picked out as sort of the overachievers to start with, they're probably the ones least equipped in terms of the quality that they've got in that squad. And like we said about individual players, that maybe they're the ones that I could see dropping off the quickest, if that. But
I don't agree.
Do you not?
No, I don't agree. I think of all of the 3 teams we've discussed, I weirdly think Stoke are the ones who have the most potential to drop off. And the main reason for that is I don't see Preston being where they are at the end of the season, and that the question we're going to ask at the end.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Do you know what? Do you know why I think Stoke probably have more of a chance? Is purely down to the management. I think Robbins is maybe a little bit more of a seasoned, but also like a bit more of an attacking minded coach than Heckingbottom. But that's not to say that
But that's
a defensive.
that's
But defensive. If you're a defensive minded coach, then actually you could.
so the
grind
reason you've just
results.
highlighted is the exact reason why I think Preston are more likely to stay up, because I think sort of stay up towards a higher point of the table. And my biggest concern is with someone like Stoke, when the goals do dry up, when a bit of form goes out, which it does every season to every single team, what's going to happen? Whereas I think with a team like Preston, what I was so impressed with is how structured they are and how solid, and what they will do. They reminded me so much of Charlton when we played them. I felt like it was like watching like a mirror, because what I thought with them is they are going to find margin gains. But with that, I think they're more likely to actually throughout a season to be maybe a bit more consistent than a Stoke who are a bit more erratic.
And ultimately, I guess consistency is going to be key in terms of where you finish in the division. Because if you can consistently grind results out, or you can consistently get points on the board, you're going to naturally stay up that higher end of the table. So you could well be right. I think, I don't know, I think Stoke maybe, for me, it's like the quality of the players is arguably slightly higher in my opinion, and the manager I do rate slightly higher as well.
Yeah.
But the style of play is going to play a factor in where those teams end up finishing. So I'm intrigued, and we'd love to hear from people, fans, because we have our view of what we see, but we don't watch them week in, week out.
And I think it's always an interesting one, because I say we have the outsider's point of view, and then you have the inside the club, and we know from obviously when you discuss Charlton, what other sometimes some.
You hear some weird opinions that you're like, where's that come from?
Well, and some players, for example, who get absolutely slated by your own fan base, but then you look in the comments of like other teams and they, that player was really insanely good, really rate him, he's going to go and do bits. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So yeah, definitely leave your comments in. So that oversights the positive side of the video.
I think there's a couple of other clubs that you could argue are probably punching a little bit above, but I think they're the standouts. Those three.
I think they are.
And they're the ones that are probably I'm most intrigued to see how they can continue in that vein of form, whether they can keep it up.
So it's going to be an interesting season. I think the most open to a surprise runaway or just a surprise package. It seems like this season is the one that's going to maybe have it more so, and maybe we're going to have a conversation at the end of the year where Preston and Stoke are both in the playoffs, and it is a really weird season where, it's got to. Don't get carried away. But so it might just be one of those weird seasons, and we've seen this such almost rinse and repeat of Prem clubs coming down, then going up, the same kind of, less so at maybe the bottom of the table, but it just seems like it's been this boring cycle, and maybe we are starting to see a breakthrough of a slightly different side.
Well, what's nice as well is that obviously the teams that obviously get relegated from the Premier League, they have a financial clout, and they've got the quality of players in their squad that they generally, obviously quite a few end up leaving, but you still keep that nucleus to a degree, and that's why you get those clubs that generally tend to rise to the top again. Like you've said, we've not really seen that so far.
No.
So the only one is Leicester, really, have been sort of solid and probably a way.
And I think Ipswich look like the engine's just starting to rev up. They look like they're
Southampton are probably the ones that are sort of still in neutral at the moment.
Yeah, but
that will probably change.
They're probably pretty fortunate at the start of the season where there hasn't been too many runaways. They could so quickly get back up there. But I'd agree. So, so I suppose from there we move into the bit that no fan wants to be a part of in this section. So close your ears if you hear your club. We're going to move on to the underachievers of the season. I think these are teams that either are massively off where they are, or maybe we thought were on that downward trajectory, but have looked a lot worse than we thought. So I think starting with that, this would very much drop into probably more the latter, especially for myself when we did the predictions. But in third place, we've got Blackburn Rovers.
Yeah, so I think Blackburn are, again, one of those clubs. They've been in the division for so long now, and I think their fans have been desperate for stuff to click and for things to change. I think when we looked at our early predictions of Blackburn, we said actually there's not been a huge amount of movement in the transfer window. So they've not really improved the squad, I would argue, massively. If anything, it might have slightly weakened. On top of that, you've got a manager that's not massively proven. He's managed a few championship clubs. So he was at West Brom, Watford, Barnsley as well previously. but they've always been a bit of a club that if things aren't going to click, they are in danger. And that's what we've seen so far, I think.
I have to admit, everything I've seen of them so far this season, and we played them,
We
but
tonked them.
yeah, and we don't do that to many teams. So
No.
that is a real alarm bell going off. But I have to admit, I see they are primed and ready for relegation. In my opinion, I know where they are.
Oh.
I'd argue, looking at it from what I saw of them, but also just the alarm bells in the background. I just think they stink of a team that are going to go down. And
Yeah,
I look at them when we played them, and I've also watched. I can't remember what other game, but I watched another game there of theirs this season.
Yeah.
I look at it and think they've got one bright spark in Todd Cantwell,
And he is good,
and if
to be fair.
and he's good,
Yeah.
but he is also the reason he never went on from Norwich and really pushed on is because he's pretty inconsistent. I
Yeah.
think maybe isn't always going to give you the quality of what he maybe does have.
Yeah.
And my biggest worry would be if he went and snapped his leg tomorrow or was
They're in
out for a
trouble.
considerable amount of time. Where else is the excitement? And maybe Blackburn fans are going to tell me that there's a load of players that are going to be coming back in. But when I saw him at the Valley, I thought that is a really, really concerning sign.
They relied on him heavily, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I mean, like he obviously was. We were able to sort of man mark him out of the game in the end, but without him in the game, they did not offer much at all when they played us. I think you're right. They haven't really got any sort of sparks that we can see. Again, Blackburn fans might disagree, but there was nothing that we saw that sort of made me think they've got someone there that could change things around.
No.
The manager's not exactly the most inspiring manager that you could ask for.
And I just worry that the cycle, I can just see it already. Give it a couple of months. Performances aren't quite good. They sack him. Then it gets in that panic stations of if they then get the wrong person again, you have the dreaded 3 managers in a season, which pretty much signs you off to a relegation in a season.
Well, so I don't know how heavily sort of the Venkis have invested in the last few years. Like I know that
they never knew they could get relegated.
Exactly, but exactly. I mean, they are a sort of an ownership model that has sort of stagnated for quite a while. If I'm sort of,
I think they came in with a lot of excitement at the beginning, and then just there has been stagnation, very little investment.
They're a bit of I look at them as a bit of a tired club. They're sort of that. They've got that sort of hangover from the Premier League days where
quite sad because they were. I was going to say
they won the Premier League, but nowadays you don't look at Blackburn and think, oh, they're a powerhouse of a team in the Championship. You kind of go there thinking, we should get something here. Even as a Charlton.
And year on year, maybe I know last year obviously they had the season they did, which was a lot better, and I think was probably for me, I look at that now and think it was a bit of an anomaly rather than a progression. And I think that's how I probably look at Blackburn. I just think the trajectory on that's bad. And looking over their last 5 results, 1-1 draw with Stoke, a 2-1 loss to Swansea, a 3-0 loss to Charlton.
Right.
1-0 win against Watford, and then a 2-0 loss to Norwich, which.
Yeah. If you lose it to Norwich this season, you're not
doing well. So, I just say my biggest concern, very little to see as exciting. And I just, got a really bad feeling for it.
I think there's a few people, I've heard like a lot of people online are saying that like Blackburn definitely could be one of those clubs that it might be their year to just drop out of the league. And I think it'd be quite sad because like we said, like we see them as like one of those traditional sort of Prem sides. Days of like Morton Gamps, Pedersen. They had some well good players like two guy, and
and as I say, that's how I see them as a staple Prem team, and they have just really, really stagnated. And a few clubs have done it, and it's sad.
It happens. And to be fair, you can't in the Championship, you can't ever be guaranteed a place in that division. And I think what some clubs, just because of their stature, does not guarantee you're not going to get relegated. And I think with them, they really need. Something has to click into place soon for them to start pushing up the league. Otherwise,
that spiral.
They're going to start spiraling. And I think you're right in terms of, I think I can see as well them dropping down. And who knows, they might still finish low down in the league and just scrape above that relegation zone. But they're definitely not going to be up there this season.
I just think as well, there's some teams around them. And I know, like everything, you never quite know how the season's going to go. But I look at some teams below them who I don't necessarily think are going to be there at the end of the season, and I just I'm really concerned for them.
Yeah,
really
same.
concerned.
I think their fans have got a right to be concerned, and I think you're right as well. I think we might see a change of management in the next couple of months, maybe coming up to Christmas. That's when they're really pushing the panic button and seeing if anything can sort of change it around. But have they got the squad? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think they have. So, okay, well, let's move on from there. So we will go to our second place on the underperformers of the season. And for me, this was quite an easy one because I was quite excited for them this season. I think change of management, all seem to be pushing in the right direction. Signings on the pitch, but a very underachieving season so far for Norwich City.
Yeah, I think we spoke about Norwich in our prediction at the start of the season, and we said it all hinges on how well Manning can come in and really sort of rejuvenate the side, because obviously they had a disappointing season under Forrest last year. They have still spent money, which they're a club that do spend money. They're not, I think, squad value-wise, they're right up there in the sort of top of the division. They have managed to keep hold of Sargent as well, who you can definitely argue is one of the best, if not the best striker in the division.
But I think since they confirmed they were going to keep him, they've just dropped out of form and he's tailed off.
Yeah, so, but I look at Norwich and I think, yeah, they've changed. Thing with Norwich is they do change things up quite regularly. They tend to, players rotate. They maybe have a couple of years and then they go off somewhere else. But they brought in quality players, and the only danger we talked about as well, though, was players from foreign divisions that you're not quite sure whether they're going to be able to play in the Championship or be at that level they need to be. They lost Signs and they've lost some key players, obviously, in the summer. Manning was the big question mark. It was, okay, he's done a good job at Bristol, but can he go into Norwich under the pressure as well? That's the key thing with Norwich.
Yeah, and I think that is the key thing. I suppose my thoughts on Norwich in general are, I worried that they've got this spliced together team now of, I saw a really interesting interview with Forup, and it was last season. I think it was on the Second Tier podcast, maybe, I can't remember, but it was a really interesting one. And in essence, what the crux of what he came to on it was that he was sold that he was going to be a project of a number of years, brought in these players that were quite young, adapting them to a system, training them up in the way that they want. And they've gone from what I would describe as a bit more of an attacking, fluid style of football under Forup to a very defensive, rigid style of football with Manning. And the problem, I think, is, one, you've got certain players who are signed for a certain manager, a certain system, and it's such a drastic change in what they're doing. The other one is, if you're going to play defensive football, be good at bloody defending. Because when you're playing defensive, ugly football and you're not getting the results, the problem is the fans will only accept that kind of football if it brings the results. And I think what you're seeing now is this frustration in the fan base where, realistically, the only reason that made sense of sacking Forup was to get a pretty instantaneous switch in direction, instant impact. And at the moment, all of the signs, and I think that's the biggest thing, all of the signs at the moment are that it's not quite clicking, it's not quite working, but the underlying data on it as well is showing that it's not just like it's unlucky, it's a tough start or whatever. It seems like there's something not right.
I think you're bang on in terms of Forup. It was Hofball, wasn't it? He was supposed to play this sort of tiki-taka, almost sort of very attacking sort of style of play. That takes time to implement, and I think there would have been a lot of Norwich fans out there that were disappointed to see him sacked. I know they underperformed last year and they finished well below where they should have, but there's probably quite a few Norwich fans out there that felt he should have been given longer to implement that style. And like you said as well, if you're going to bring a manager in like Manning, who predominantly is more defensive minded, and that probably comes as well from managing teams like Bristol, who he batted above what he should have been, and he probably built that side a little bit off of sort of a really solid back line and then being able to get results from that, a bit like how teams that aren't expected to be up there, that's kind of how you have to almost go about it, unless you really go gung-ho and just go all out. I think you're already seeing the fans get on his back. I don't think Norwich fans want to see a defensive style of play. They're not used to that, I don't think.
No, and I think that's what concerns me the most, because I think there's not too many more games of the kind of results they've had. And
they get booed at their own ground. Their home form is abysmal. They haven't won a home game.
The Boo Boys.
Yeah, the Boo Boys are out in force. And what happened when the Boo Boys come out? To be fair, you're not even, because usually playing at home, and Carrow Road at times is a fortress. To be fair, is they sell out week in, week out. They get a good atmosphere there. But if you're getting a sort of toxic atmosphere every week, you go 1-0 down, all of a sudden it
works. I think any atmosphere like that, it works so much in your favour when you're doing well, but it can quite easily become toxic when things are going bad. And I think that's my general feeling over it at the moment. It seems like it's a fan base and a club that seems in a bit of disarray, because they have gone in with the investment. They've gone pretty heavy on it. I just don't know if they've done it in the right way. And my biggest concern to them is, as I say, there's little green shoots with Manning, but my gut feeling looking at the start of the season is I'm more in the camp at the moment of I'd be surprised if he's there by Christmas. And I think that there may just be a really, really important few games coming up. So I think they've got a run of games that in this division it's very difficult, but I'd say are more winnable at the moment.
You look at them and you think they're winnable.
Yeah, and I think, but also on the flip side of that is if they're not won and there's a poor taking of points in those as well, especially off the back of the tanking they got from Ipswich, for example, first time in, was it 26?
16 years. Sorry. Yeah, 16, but still, that's a long time to go.
And that's something that's like pride-worthy. So in a bad season, to lose that, to have everything else all in, it just seems like...
Well, for me as well, the home form is a key, because it's great to get wins away from home, but if your home form's poor, the fans will get on your back. They don't want to turn up week in, week out. Season ticket holders don't want to be there to watch their team get outplayed and lose every week. And I think you're right. He's got a few games left to really turn things around, to start getting a couple of wins on the board. You imagine if they win, even if they won 1 and lost 2, do you know what I mean? They're still not going to be happy with that. There's got to be a significant turnaround in form. And I think that is really going to be the key in Manning's tenure at Norwich, will be whether he can turn things around. Because we've seen it before when Jones was on the ropes for a little while. And we've seen it with managers where they've been on the brink of being sacked and they've managed to turn it around. But whether he's got that in the locker,
the problem I think with it now is that he's lost the ability to get middle of the road results. It is now almost fight or flight. It's very much, you have to now see an incredibly good run of form, which is what Jones, like you describe, and Jones was in that exact position. He then went on one of our best runs of forms we've seen probably over the last 10 years. And that's how he kind of got all the fans back on board. And I just think that's what it's going to have to take at the moment from Manning. And look, fortunate table, it could be 5 games time.
We're still speaking at a time in the season where we're 9 games in and the table's still fairly tight. If Norwich lose a few more games, all of a sudden they start seeing themselves getting cut adrift from the top of the table. That is when the ownership and the people and the fans are going to be saying, right, okay, we might have to do something here.
I've been quite a lot of negatives around their Napa as well.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of Norwich fans aren't too pleased about some of the signings they brought in, or how they've been promised a certain level of signing and it's not really turned out to be the case. Don't forget, like I said, they've lost key players in like Signs and the boy who went to Ipswich. Loved his day waving the flag.
Do you see the Twitter comment? Someone's done something bad to him in Norwich.
Yes.
Don't know what they've done.
He's got a vendetta against him now, but yeah, I am really intrigued to see how these next few games play out for Norwich, and I think we will see very soon whether Manning will be there for the long term or not.
Well, I'll report back because I'm going to Carrow Road on the... I can't remember what the date. I think it's the 8th of November for the Leicester game, so it'll be interesting to see. Will Manning be there at the time?
I think also to any Norwich fans who are watching or see any of these videos, let us know like what your thoughts are and whether you see things turning around or whether you think actually Manning's not up to it and we need to sort of change this quickly. So yeah, I'm interested to know.
Yeah, be a very interesting one. So I think in most seasons Norwich would have taken number 1 spot because I think it has been a very disappointing start, but someone has come along and desperately tried to clinch that and has done it very successfully, and I think to no surprise it is Sheffield, but not Wednesday United. I mean, just I couldn't be more surprised. I mean, you look at it, 9 games in, 1 win,
3 points. Yeah,
what's gone on there?
Well, we know obviously Sellers came in and clearly something was up there straight away in terms of whether it's the players didn't buy into him, whether he just got his tactics horribly wrong. Sheffield United, when they've been in the Championship, they've always been like a really solid team, really tough to beat, really hard to break down. Again, they're a team that over the years have managed to build up a really quality squad as well. They're littered with really good quality players at that level. So that's even more surprising. They got the likes of Hamer, they've got Louis Barry they brought in, Campbell. They've got so many quality players for that level of football.
Players who shouldn't be sitting at the bottom.
It's outrageous, really, when you look at it. And I know, obviously, they had 5 games where they didn't get anything. Got rid of Sellers. Wilder's come in. He got 1 win, but then lost to Hull last week. So, and I think he quickly realised it because he obviously lost to Charlton as well in his first game. But
we're saying that a lot in this episode.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, got to get those in there when we can.
It's almost like we cherry pick the tunes.
Yeah. But what I would say is, I think Wilder initially said it when he first came into the Charlton game, was he realised there's more work to be done than he probably thought. Because
quite amazing considering it was only a few months ago they were in the playoff final under Wilder.
Yeah, so really unlucky as well.
Sellers gone in and done in that time that needs so much unpicking.
Stunk the place out, hasn't
it? It is such a. I mean, because I thought Wilder would come in and it would be a relatively, all the players kind of know where to drop back into the system.
Yeah.
And it would be a turnaround.
You said as well, like they've got a nucleus of players that played under Wilder.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're going, he fair enough, like Sellers has come in and brought some players in that he wanted, but he's still got a core of that team that should be able to perform under him. Yeah. And that's probably what, even Sheffield United fans probably, when they saw Wilder come back in, okay, right, we're going to turn this around. I don't think it's going to be as easy as they think in terms of how quickly it's going to turn around.
Do you think recoverable in regards to playoffs?
I think...
Or is recovering a mid-table finish this year? Because there must be some Sheffield United fans, and my view would be, you've seen it happen to Charlton, Leeds, Southampton, Norwich. So many big clubs over the years who have gone down. No one is immune to relegation.
Yeah.
There must be a bit of some Sheffield United fans who do look at it and think...
the longer it goes on, I mean, 3 points after 9 games is abysmal.
It's early enough not to be in complete panic stations.
Yeah.
There must be a kind of bit of a concern.
I think, like, and like, you're right, there's been big clubs get relegated into League One. We've seen it. You mentioned, like, loads of them there. Wolves, another one. Like, there's been clubs that you would never ever think would go down. But Sheffield United, it happened to them not that long ago. We were playing them in League One not that long ago. So yeah, their fans in the back of their minds are thinking, bloody hell, we could be back where we were. Yeah. And they're not going to want that one bit. So the key thing for them is those players we mentioned, the key players, the ones that have got the real quality, have to start stepping up and getting some goals in the games. O'Hare, I think, got the goal. They won their first game of the season, but they only scraped it 1-0. I think they scored quite late in that game as well. So even the games that like in Oxford, you'd expect that's probably one of the easiest games they're going to have this season on paper.
Oh, you're going to have Oxford fans in here raging.
We will. But on paper, you'd say Oxford are one of the weaker sides in the Championship, and they've scraped a 1-0 win against them. They've gone to Hull and lost.
Well, let's go out. I mean, their last 5 games. So Hull 1-0 loss, Southampton 2-1 loss, Oxford 1-0 win, Charlton 1-0 loss, and then a 5-0 drubbing by Ipswich.
Yeah, they got smashed in that game.
Lovely goals in there. That Philogene.
Oh, he's unreal. Yeah. Well, he's got another one against Norwich.
Yeah, just stunner after stunner. And it's like him and Fatua, I think, as end of the season. It's just going to highlight you going back.
And James Bree as well.
Yeah, James Bree.
But yeah, I just think with Sheffield United, they will. I'm confident they will not get relegated. It's a ridiculous thing to be coming out with because at the start of the season I had them in top 2 or 3. I might have had them 3rd, but I had them in easily in the top 6, and I think most people did because of their pedigree, because of the players they've got in that squad. But my word, they have started badly.
Yeah, and as I say, I think the fact they have brought Wilder back in is what probably makes me think it will start to turn into something at some point. But Wilder's not necessarily renowned for playing the most stunning of football, and especially I think especially when form is low, I'm not sure he's the manager who does completely drag you out instantaneously, and maybe why we are still seeing that slightly slower burn.
I think maybe a question for Sheffield United fans as well. It's a sort of, do they expect him to come in and just completely change the results around overnight? Because what happens as well is a team, you've got a nucleus of a team that's very good, but if they're used to losing week in, week out, which momentum's huge in football, if you are a team that's really low on confidence, it takes a little while to turn that around.
Oh, 100%.
And we've seen it. Every fan of every club has seen it. When your team's in a rut and you can't get by a result, it gets bloody difficult.
I think the only thing Sheffield United fans were probably hoping for was that a little bit of the new manager bounce, just to release a bit of pressure, because at the moment they're still right in that position.
Well, also they're going to give Wilder time,
Of course.
regardless what happens. Like even if they go on.
Although we speak about the realistic side, we speak about seasons where 3 managers is almost like a curse of going down.
Yeah.
I don't think they would now. I mean, Wilder's been back and forth so many times.
Yeah.
I really doubt they are going to do anything this year. But
Yeah,
a very interesting one, because I say I did not see that coming at all. Look, I could see the prediction of maybe, like everything, they were probably of that top tier of teams, the one that we could maybe question mark a little bit more. But we were not. At the beginning of the season, we were question marking whether it's second or third.
Yeah. Like that's
23rd or 24th. So
yeah. But I was just,
and it takes something really special as well to drop below Sheffield Wednesday.
well, I was just about to say how must Sheffield Wednesday fans be feeling? They knew they were going to go in for a tough ride this year, but I don't think in any world they thought Sheffield United.
It's got to be the only bright spark to every bit of awful side going on with them at the moment.
Yeah.
There must just be a small side of them that just smiles.
Well, also Sheffield United can't give them any crap, can they? Because they're sitting below. So.
Yeah, no, very surprising. So, so I think that covers over everything. So a bit of a different episode this week. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. As I say, we'd love to hear from you guys in the comments today, because I think we discussed over a lot of points, so we would like to know your point of view. Equally as well, if you have liked the video, please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Really helps us out. We're kind of growing and bringing more content out to you guys. So, so no international break next week. We'll be back with Charlton related video of hopefully
We've got Sheffield Wednesday coming up.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
So very apt as the end one there. So hopefully get a win there.
The other thing I just mentioned as well, the TikTok. Obviously we've started that up. Give that a follow as well, because we'll put out some shorter clips and stuff. Again, you can leave comments in those as well. We always want to hear people's opinions.
I think it's interesting because, to say, you come from it. We've always said we're two brothers who just chat along. Realistically, we know our opinion is not necessarily the right one.
Also, as well, like we said it already in this video, but other fans of other clubs are going to have a much better idea of their own club. We see it from an outside point of view. We see how they come across when we play them in the league, but obviously they have a much better in-depth sort of knowledge of it. So we could be chatting
absolute crap. Probably.
Yeah.
Seems like a likely outcome. So, okay, brilliant. Well, look, as I say, thank you very much for watching today, and we will see you on the next one.